a couple of you were talking about metaphors when I asked that question in the chat. With metaphors, I remember in one of my university lectures, university I was telling you about earlier, I studied psychology at university. And psychology uses a lot of metaphors, particularly to help us to understand the brain. So we're taking something that's very complex and we're trying to help people to understand it. And even psychologists have to do this themselves to help themselves understand what they're studying. And I remember I was in one of my first year lectures and we again taught about brain imaging tools. So things that we can use to measure the brain. There's this one technique, it's called EEG, electro something graphy. Glad my tuition was put to good use. So it's electro, oh, that's really gonna bug me. I should know that. Basically what happens, you have all of these like tiny little modules and they get glued onto your head. And I had to be a subject in an experiment for one of these. It was very kind of uncomfortable. So you get this kind of like pasty gel and you get all this pasty gel put on your head and that conducts the electricity from these sensors. And there's like 50 of these sensors that get put all around your skull and they get to measure electrical activity in the brain. The way our lecturer described this, she said, okay, you're all first year students. You like to party, right? There's a big party on campus. Now you haven't been invited, loser. And you're standing outside the venue. You can hear some of the party, but you want to know, okay, is anyone I know in there? Are any of my friends in there? If you're just standing outside, you're not going to be able to hear any individual voices. It's all just one big noise. So she says, you go out to the party and you maybe go to a window and you try and listen through an open window. You might put a cup against the wall. And she said, that's what we're trying to do with your brain. Your brain is having a party. There's loads of activity going on in the skull. And we are the uncool students who haven't been invited to the party, and we're trying to listen into that brain. I still remember that way of explaining it a dozen years later. That image stuck with me. Now she said, okay, I can't even remember the acronym, can I? EEG, it's electrical something graphy. I can't even remember what it stands for, but I remember how it works because she told me about the party. That is the power of metaphor. We use metaphors to help people understand something they haven't experienced, something that's complex, by using something they have experienced, something that's a lot more simple. And we do this a lot of the brain in particular. There's a lot of metaphors of the brain. For example, we talk about the brain storing memory. It kind of doesn't store memory, not in the way of like on our computers where you have a folder and then you have a subfolder and then you have a file. Our brain doesn't really work like that for memory, but it's a decent way to think about it to try and understand how memory works. We talk about the brain processing information. A lot of our terminology is computer-based. We talk about we have the RAM of our brain or the central processing unit of our brain. Now, all of these terms, they aren't strictly true, but they do help us to understand something very complex by using something that that's more familiar, if not necessarily more simple. How do we use metaphors? Metaphors are where you compare one thing and say it's like something else. So a metaphor is a very direct comparison. For example, the brain's memory is like a computer's memory. Now, it's not strictly true, but we're talking about it as if it is. With a metaphor, you'll often hear the word is or was. This thing is this thing. This thing was this thing. So something like money is the root of all evil. That's a metaphor. Money isn't a root and it doesn't have this kind of big demon or poison or anything on it. Money is not a root, but when we talk about how greed or corruption is a bad thing, money is the root of all evil. Anytime you hear this thing is this thing was this thing, something like there's the Napoleon film out at the moment. So Napoleon was a lion in battle. Now, he wasn't a lion. He didn't have claws and a big mane, did he? It talks about his ferociousness, his bravery, his ruthlessness. Napoleon was not a lion like a big feline, but talking about him like a lion helps us to understand some of those qualities that he maybe had. Metaphor, direct comparison using is or was. When you're trying to explain something that's complex or technical or nuanced to your audience, what's a comparison that you can make with something that they know and is familiar with them to help them understand what you're sharing that's maybe unknown or unfamiliar with them? So I want you to think about what is something Hans, thank you. Thank you for completing the acronym for me. I want you to think about something in your subject of expertise, the topic that you speak on, that is perhaps a little bit complex or technical to explain. And I want you to think about what you could compare it to that would help people to understand it. So I'll give you a minute or so to think of that. When you've got a metaphor, now again, we're not looking for the polished, finished article here. This is just you brainstorming and thinking of creative ideas using your imagination. When you've got a metaphor, pop it into the chat and let's see what we can come up with. What you've just seen there is a snippet of my Amplify online course. Amplify, Spark Your Speeches, helps aspiring speakers to create engaging content and deliver it effectively. It's a step-by-step program that guides you through your speaking journey at your own pace. It's a series of live workshop recordings. So you get to have the interactive experience of being in that live setting, but you get to do it on your own time. No worrying about time zones, schedules, all of that kind of fluff. There's lots of additional learning resources in the course that complement and add to the workshops that you go through. It's a 12-month program, and you can access the course in the first month for a $1 trial. So you get to come into the program, see what it's all about, and see if it's going to be right for you and your speaking development. To access your $1 trial, I've put the link in the description below. If you click that link, go through to our course homepage, and at checkout, enter the code YouTube, that's where you've come from, to get your first month for a $1 trial. Click the link in the description below, and I look forward to seeing you in the course.